What constitutes abuse within the failure to protect law is fairly wide ranging. Like
Yes.
it goes from verbal abuse, of verbally violent arguments, to physical harm. So
they don't include, that's what I was talking about earlier, they don't include coercive control, they don't include non-fatal strangulation, there's a lot of definitions that they do not include in there.
right.
And it's not their fault really, because like when you think about it, domestic violence has only really become an issue since like the 80s, even though it was like apparent like way before then, it just wasn't talked about. Their definition on what they knew then.
Right.
We know now that it's not just physical, it's psychological, it's emotional, it's financial, it's technological. There's so many different aspects to abuse that needs to be included in that definition.
And thankfully, our legislation is working on that. But it's literally word by word.
Mm-hmm.
They've got to be careful that whatever law that they write, whatever changes that they try, that they don't backfire on the survivors, which we've all been experiencing already. Don't want to make it any worse than it already is. Failure to protect law. And I noticed that when I was coming through, especially during the early time of my healing, when I was like really in counseling and really in therapy, I was going like 2 and 3 times a week. And I was especially in group therapy when there are other men and women in the room, all ages, all demographics, live in all certain areas, have all different types of jobs. The vast majority of them, I'd say 75% of them, had children. Most of them had fallen victim to the failure to protect law. And I remember there was this one woman who, she had a teenage daughter, and going through the court process, the courts deemed physical custody to the dad, and he was a sex offender. And I'm like, how does that happen? How something that out of this world and out of someone's consciousness actually happen? What they say is that, well, I mean, you didn't protect your children from violence. You didn't protect your children from whatever it is that's going on in the home. The problem is that the failure to protect law judges the situation by the black and white facts. Being survivors, I'd say about 90% of domestic violence situations is unseen, unheard, psychological, mental, verbal, and all of that leads up to the physical and or sexual if that happens. Thankfully though, here in LA, the Domestic Violence Council, several lawmakers and several lawyers are actively working with Sacramento to change the language and implement new legislation to be able to change the failure to protect law to make it fair. There are so many people, there are so many, especially women, especially mothers, especially wives, that have fallen victim to this, and it is a blind side. Because realistically, once someone such as yourself manages to get out of the domestic violence situation, then you have a chance to function in a way that is not threatening your life. So your brain will have a chance to get back to a normal state.
Right.
And you will be able to be the parent, the center of love and support and understanding that your children will need. What do these people think is going to happen when all of a sudden these kids are snatched not only from the unhealthy parent, but the parent who could be healthy now that they're outside of the domestic violence situation? I
actually think that it's like a bigger problem than people like really realize. Like that, I see the problem that the lawmakers are having, because it's not cut and dry. Mm-hmm. Domestic violence is not like you have this situation and this situation, and they all fit into that one like little category. That's not how it is at all. That's why like so many people, they ask like, oh, why didn't you just leave? And so like, and the only way that I could describe it is a chess game. You're playing a game of chess, and you're the rooks and the knights and the bishop, those are your outside support systems. Those are your work, your family, your friends, anyone that can validate what you're going through or can help you pull you out. So those are taken away from you. And the pawns are actually like pieces of yourself, your self-worth, your anything that you're proud of, like on the, like intrinsically on the inside. And those are chipped away at you. And you're kind of backed into this corner. So once you're in this corner, you expect the police and the courts to help you, but they're not equipped to deal with people who are abusers, the manipulative tactics, the tools that they use. And I've had so many people reach out to me and they're like, well, he's doing this and this and this. And I've told them this, but they don't have any proof because you can't prove it really. And so the courts, they really just care about what's on paper. And not only that, like the laws, like when it comes to no contact, like cyber stalking, that's a huge one. We live in a technological age right now. And no contact orders most often do not cover cyber stalking. And that's still inflicting that abuse. And not only that, what DSS and the police are doing is actually inflicting more abuse on the victim. So instead of helping us, they're hindering us.
All these officials, all these individuals who are charged with making decisions about our lives, they need to have specific and focused domestic violence training.
Yes,
because
definitely.
They have no idea. They still believe that domestic violence is bruises and broken bones. I'm like, oh my God. If they knew what the nuances, it's ridiculous. It is archaic.
Yes, it is.
If they knew what the nuances were, if they knew what the slight behaviors were, if they knew how psychological abuse manifested itself in physical behavior, especially in a survivor, you'd be able to tell just in a courtroom setting how a potential survivor would be conducting themselves in the presence of the abuser that's sitting right there at the next table. You can tell. But if you're not exposed to that, if you don't have the personal experience with it, number one, and if you're not trained in it, you have no idea what to look for. All these social workers, they're in dire need of domestic violence training. And
yes, they are. Definitely.
To make a big difference.
Yes, because when I started first reporting that my abuser was sexually abusing my daughter and other children, they were still trying to put my children in that home. And like I fired off like novel texts and posted them all over social media. And I said, this is going to look bad on you. When all of this comes out that you actually put my children in a home with pedophiles. I said, you're supposed to be protecting me and my children, especially my children. And I said, basically, you do no such thing whatsoever. In my opinion, you're child trafficking. That's all you're doing. And basically, I think how the laws are set up now is that we have to be our own advocates and protect ourselves. So once we leave, we're kind of just thrust right out there. And especially when it comes to like safe homes, I know in South Carolina, the one that I was at, they actually report to DSS every single thing that I was doing. And I was just, and I'm like, how's that helping me? You guys are doing nothing for my mental health. You're basically just, yes, you're giving me a roof over my head, but that's pretty much it. Everything I'm doing is reporting. I felt like I was walking on eggshells. And it's like that for so many people. Like, why are there so many domestic violence shelters out there? Why? Because of the failure to protect law. We're the ones who are fleeing abuse. We're the ones who are like, basically like trying to defend ourselves against like interrogational tactics of DSS, of the police, of the courts.
I had a friend a while back who worked for DSS and she had to quit. She watched her colleagues make these decisions about these families, having to go into these homes and make these really hard decisions about these families with these really archaic laws, and she couldn't stomach it. She's like, I can't walk into these homes and take these children from these families when they're obviously doing everything they can possibly do for the well-being of both themselves and their children, but they're just so limited by the archaic laws that they have to live by. Some of them.
And so you have those people that have that integrity and that that character, but yet you have a whole lot of DSS caseworkers who do not feel that way. Case in point, can I say the name?
Not about. Go.
Okay. Say, case in point.
What was her name?
Emily Dunlap. Who, oh God, she enjoyed being like having that power over people, and I fought tooth and nail and campaigned for her to be replaced. And we were talking about that, and I think it took, what was that, 2 or 3 months of like actively like sending emails to get rid of this person because she was that horrible. And there's actually a lot of DSS caseworkers that are like that.
Was she removed?
She still works there, but she's just not on this case.
I went into a police station to ask for help, and this was after I had left him, and there were orders and stuff like that. And you know what he told me? He said, "Deal with it."
And see, that's another victim blaming again.
Yeah,
victim blaming, like, victim shaming, failure to protect.
Failure to protect. You have that badge to protect. If you don't protect, you shouldn't have it. Go find something else to do. But that was my one and only experience with an officer like that. All of the other ones were incredible. Super understanding, super supportive, just wonderful. But most do not have the experience with law enforcement than I did. Law enforcement shows up to the scene and ends up arresting them and taking them to jail.
Yep. Like
what we were talking about with Christine. For the pregnant, broke, bruises, everything. They end up arresting her.
And that goes back to the failure to protect and not having the knowledge about what domestic violence is and what it entails, all the psychological abuse and how manipulative they are. Like they don't know. From parental alienation.
Yes.
Sexual predators have actually been using that law to gain custody of their children, even though they're sexually abusing them.
I mean, people don't know that abusers are really common. It's just that they know how to hide in plain sight in a way that you'll never be able to know that you are having a conversation with them, sitting down to lunch with them, unless you are now in a relationship with them down the line and they've already been grooming you. So
the weird thing is that like when it comes to like sexual predators and domestic violence abusers, they both use the same tools.
And another term for that is love bombing. And I've been noticing a lot of articles and a lot of posts now on social media about love bombing. I'm like, okay, now just understand that there's another group. There's another term for that for other types of predators, and it's called grooming. And
yes, let's call it what it is. It's grooming. That's what it is.
And that's scary. That's terrifying because you don't realize you're being groomed. So all of that information is being cataloged to be able to tell if you are suitable as a victim.
So I put up this post about, because a lot of people have asked me like if there's a difference between narcissists and sociopaths and psychopaths. There is a difference. There's a huge difference. All three are narcissists, definitely. However, the sociopath, they like take joy in other people's pain. The psychopath will actually do things to cause the pain as well as take joy in it.
I learned about those first time when I was in group counseling, and one of the first TED Talks that we watched was on ACEs, and the individual that was giving the talk is now California Surgeon General. Her name is Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, and she has a organization out of Northern California that does nothing but study adverse childhood experiences. Just knowing the science behind it all and how trauma affects the brain before you're even born, in the womb. Mm-hmm. So if a pregnant woman, for instance, is in a violent situation, a violent home, and she's experiencing domestic violence, the hormonal and the physical unrest that is causing in her body, that's causing all sorts of chemical release and whatnot, that baby is getting all of those chemicals. Mm-hmm. So, and the baby can hear what's going on outside of,
and feel the pain.
That's all that's going on without the baby even being alive. So mm-hmm. the baby comes out not really being wired for trauma. Okay, mm-hmm. Just because the baby can't talk doesn't mean it isn't suffering PTSD from the moment it's born. Adverse childhood experiences start to happen in the womb, and it starts to cause your brain to become wired in an abnormal manner.
Teaching about domestic violence awareness mm-hmm. when they're younger, mm-hmm. when they're in school, and creating the change that way, the proactive change. That way it's generational. It has to start somewhere. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not going to be fixed overnight. Definitely not, because mm-hmm. it has become like epidemic proportions. Mm-hmm. It's not just because of COVID, because this existed way before COVID. Mm-hmm. But it has to start somewhere, and being proactive is one huge step.
This was my take on it. I was gifted with the responsibility of caring for my son. If he didn't think I was capable of doing it, if he didn't think I was the right person to do it, he wouldn't have given it to me. Mm-hmm. So what type of parent would I be if I stayed? Mm-hmm. I would not be doing my job.
Right.
And I would be letting him down, and I'd be letting my son down. I had to prioritize my son. I couldn't continue to stay in a situation where I was dealing with an adult that knew better.
Yeah.
And it's an active choice to be abusive. And however it is that you're doing it, it's an active mm-hmm. choice to be abusive. So you mm-hmm. either choose to face your behavior and face your decisions and do something about them, and really truly put the well-being of your family and your children first, and be healthy and really truly love them.
Yeah.
Or not.
I was actually reading something about abusers, they have hurt childhood, and they don't know what they're doing, and blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. And I rolled my eyes, honestly. I really did. They know damn well what they're doing. Mm-hmm. They do, 100%. Just because they were hurt in childhood does not mean that they have license to go around hurting people. Most of them never will admit that they did anything wrong. They're going to continue doing what they're doing. And I think it's just one huge big excuse, really.
Right. I do absolutely agree with you. And abusers didn't become abusers really without being abused themselves. So that is true. Most of them will never face it. Most of them will never seek help. Most of them will never get the help that they need. But there are a handful who do. And they are an incredible, I want to sit down with some reformed abusers so people can get that perspective. So people can understand what it takes to reform oneself, to actually face it and go through the healing, and then go far beyond that and speak out about it and against it. Because then they're being a survivor of their own experience as well.
I actually did see someone on YouTube who is diagnosed twice, he said, with narcissistic personality disorder. And he does give speeches, gives talks, because he is aware of it, and he actively tries to change it. So he does these public speaking events just to tell people, look, this is what it's like. This is what it takes to change. And as for Scott, I'm actually looking forward to the day when I can confront him when he goes to that hearing for his probation. Mm-hmm. I would love to look him in the face, and so he sees every single word that I'm saying, and I want him to know it's me, because you know what, this is what you did to me. This is what you did to my children, and you know what, you couldn't break me. No matter how hard you tried, you could not do it. Mm-hmm. And I'm so much better, and I'm so much happier, and so much healthier without you. Yeah. And I hope you rot in jail.
He probably will, and I'm sure he will. And they need to be faced with that, because part of why they do what they do is the belief that they're invincible. Society has implanted that in them. Because
I would dare say that society is complicit in allowing them to continue to abuse their victims.
Give our young people, like you said, the tools in order to be able to keep it from happening to them. And then that becomes generational. The proactivity becomes generational. So
exactly.
It's easy to be able to turn this around. It's just education and awareness. Just talking about it. No longer being afraid to talk about it. But I do, though, understand the fear to talk about it to a certain extent. Past year has been glorious.
Yeah.
Glorious. Been able to really focus on life and really focus on healing and focus on school for my son and not have what that dark cloud just right over your shoulder, having to worry about, can I still outrun that dark cloud? Mm-hmm. So once you get out, you will do anything that you can in order to stay out. Mm-hmm. So having to turn back around and having to face that, survivors, and once they have the courage to get out, they will do anything that they can to keep from having to experiencing it again. So I understand why some just don't want to talk about it, want to be private, shut that door and lock it and don't ever.
Because if people really want to know what it's like, speak to the survivors.
Yep.
They will give you the best information out there that you can't find really in any book. It's almost over. I keep telling myself it's almost over.
One of the things that I see when I imagine like your story, like when we talk about your story and how we envision it's going to end up, like I imagine, like, you know how you see these like sensational trials in these movies and whatnot that fight for injustice, and they're in these huge courtrooms, and you have the courtroom is packed to the gills, and you have people out on the street and they're just chanting with their signs, and you have news media and whatnot, and I just see survivors standing up in the seats and they're all holding hands. And I wish that we could do that now. I wish, like when I talk to a survivor, I wish that we could all just like teleport and just be there with that new survivor that comes into our circle and to just hold their hand. Really, we're linking each other for life, and we're linking each other to help the new one to the game, the new one in the circle, because it makes such a big difference. And
then people would say like, I believe you. And I'm like, and I was like, oh my God, thank you. Mm-hmm. Someone believes me. I'm not alone. I'm not doing this by myself. I actually do have people supporting me and who actually care about what's going on. And it's happened to them too. Mm-hmm. And it's like, there's so many of us out there. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you're right. We're not alone. We're not.
A survivor that I got in touch with just Friday, the one who reached out to me through Instagram, she sent me an email, and the first line was, I know you're not going to believe me when I tell you this, but I'm telling you the truth. Mm-hmm. She hadn't even told me what was going on yet.
Yeah.
And so I told her, I said, no matter who comes to me, just know that before you open your mouth, I believe you. Why? Yeah. Because I've lived it too. And I've had to deal with the pain of people, even people close to me, not listening, not understanding, mm-hmm. not believing, telling me to just suck it up and not be so emotional. So before you even tell me your story, I believe you. Know that.
Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the most, like, the best phrase I've ever heard throughout this whole thing is, I believe you.
It's so horrible. It's so terrible and so needless and so just unnecessary for people mm-hmm. to go through this. And
it really is.
Well, is there anything you want to say to folks about like the failure to protect in your experience and how they might be experiencing it or anything like that?
I would like to say that the United States is a first world country. Mm-hmm. I expected so much better. America needs to do better. And these lawmakers, they're supposed to be working for us, for the public. They need to do something. Like, enough is enough.